Hi everyone, my name is Lizette Marx and I'm a professional holistic chef, nutritionist, and yoga teacher. And I love to help people try and get healthier and by teaching them how to cook intentionally and with mindfulness, and also to get better energy and resilience. And so today I am going to show you how to make a butternut squash soup. In one of my other videos I showed you how to cut a butternut squash, and you can use the same technique for other winter squashes. But today I'm showing you the butternut squash soup, and this is a really simple version. There's so many different recipes out there. This is one that I use when I just don't feel like cutting that much. So instead of the cutting that I showed you in that other video, I alluded to one way to deal with your butternut squash is to just poke holes in it and stick it in the oven. That's what I did here. If you can see that, I have the butternut squash just came out of the oven about half an hour ago. I let it cool off because it's pretty hot. But as you can see, it's pretty soft. You can really push into it. And so this is great base for making the soup because already it's soft and it's ready to blend. So I also, in addition to roasting the butternut squash, instead of cutting onions and all the other things that I want to put in my soup, I decided to roast the onions. So I have them here in a bowl, and I roasted them right in their skins. So all I have to do is take the skins off. If you want to trim them a little, you can. I also roasted a whole head of garlic. And what I did to do that, I'm putting all my onion skins in here, but I will show you step by step how you can roast a head of garlic safely in tin foil. So a lot of times we just put the tin foil there. I like to line it in parchment paper. It's super easy. So just gonna set that aside, and then I'll show you how I roasted the apple. So here's the apple, see? So the apple was roasted just like you would bake an apple. And now we can just take the skin off of it and just peel that off. If there's a little skin that still remains, that's okay. You'll just blend it up in a high-powered blender. I have a Vitamix next to me. And so I'm just gonna do that. And then before I blend everything up, let me show you the other ingredients that I have going here. So the couple other ingredients that I have, we need a good quality stock. And so we make bone broth all the time. So this is a really wonderful chicken bone stock that we're going to be using. And then I'm just using what I have in the fridge here. I didn't have a ton of the bone stock. It's very flavorful, but I also have some mineral broth too, and I think the two will pair up nicely. And then I'm also going to use a little bit of coconut milk. My other flavors come with my oil infusion. So I make this oil infusion that I'm going to show you that combines the flavors of Garam Masala and curry. And so here's a Garam Masala that I made, and this is a blend of northern Indian spices: cinnamon, cardamom, fenugreek, and a little cumin powder. So every Garam Masala is a little different, and you can have the ratios can change depending on the kind of aroma and also the spiciness. It's also known as a kind of a hot powder, so it's known for its hot and sweet spice. So this is going into the infusion of a little bit of coconut oil. So I'm using a extra virgin unrefined coconut oil, and I'm going to infuse the Garam Masala in there, the curry powder. And curry powder, the reason it's yellow, also another beautiful and popular Indian spice with lots of flavor. The reason why it's yellow is because it has a lot of turmeric in it, just in case you're wondering on that one. And then we'll use some chili flakes. So let me get that together, and while that's infusing, I'll start to scoop out this butternut squash. So what you do first is we're going to get the oil and put it right in the pot. Just like that. Then I'm going to turn on my heat. And we want the heat very low. So just low heat here. We don't want to add a lot of heat while we're infusing the oil. It's more about time, and it needs to infuse, I would say, just let it melt and kind of hang around in the heat for about 8 minutes or so. It doesn't need to be there that long. So put about 2 teaspoons of the Garam Masala. It looks like a lot, but it really adds beautiful flavor. And then we'll use about a half a teaspoon of curry powder. And about a quarter teaspoon of chili flakes. Don't go too high on that because they do get a little too spicy. If you like heat, then add more chili flakes. So about a 1/4 teaspoon. That's about half of this spoon here. That's good. Okay. If you go a little overboard, that's okay. I like the heat. If you are really sensitive to heat, omit it. And then we want some salt. So about half a teaspoon of salt here. And as you can see, already everything's melting together. And this is our infusion that's going to flavor. And something that, just so you know, a little information on garam masala. Garam masala tastes best when you don't heat it too much, meaning you don't saute it and let it cook for hours and hours. You know, if you're making something, a lot of times we spice things in the onions, or if you're making a mirepoix, you put your spices there. But for garam masala, it's better to add it at the end. So this technique works really well. And all the other spices I included, like the curry powder and the chili flakes, also don't need a tremendous amount of long-lasting heat. So this little brief infusion is perfect. So you just wait till that melts, and I'm just gonna let it stay on the heat there for about 8 minutes or so. If anyone's out there with a timer, go ahead. All right, so now let's get this butternut squash ready. So let me move a few things out of the way. So to get it, there's going to be seeds in here, so be aware of that. Just cut it with a knife. Notice how easily it went in, just like butter. Open it up. So how long did this take to cook, you're probably asking? Well, I cooked it at about 350 and it took about an hour, a little over an hour. And that's because this is a pretty big butternut squash. You just put the seeds right on the pan, take them out. If you have a little extra time, you can clean these off and toast them, and then they can be used in another recipe. So we're just gonna take it out. We don't need it for this particular recipe, but again, you know, if I wanted to play around with the seeds, I would. The other thing you could do with the seeds is you can add them to mineral broth, because the seeds work really well in a mineral broth. And now we're just going to take all of this and scoop it out. So before I scoop it out, I need a bowl. So let me get our Vitamix. We're gonna put the onions in first, just because I peel them up, and then I'm gonna use this bowl. So onions go in, now let's put in our butternut squash. So just scoop it out. I like to scoop it out in the bowl first, just in case you find any seeds, you can pick them out. But again, if you're using a high-powered blender, it'll probably blend up. So just, and this has been baking, it bakes so well. Notice how it's falling apart literally in my hand. I'm probably gonna have to set it down here in a minute. I can just really take that out. Okay, so let's scrape it down. You can do the same technique with pumpkin, kabocha squash, even delicata squash. Okay, let's take a little look here at the infusion here. It's been going, oh, it's slightly bubbling. It looks good. I'm gonna take it off the heat and just let it hang out. Okay, and then we're just gonna scoop out more of this. So butternut squash, really healthy winter squash this time of year. And one of the things it's known for is all the beta carotenes in there. It's also a really good slow release starch. So I really like that, because for people who like sweet things, especially around the fall or the winter, you want something sweet and cozy, and I think butternut squash does the trick. You could also use yams for this recipe. So exactly what I'm doing here, use a yam instead, or a sweet potato if you don't happen to have this one. And you see I just found a little skin there. Okay, a little more. Now, if you feel like you have more than enough squash, like sometimes you get one of these big guys, then you can save some of the butternut squash, not for soup, but save a little bit of the puree for muffins or for pancakes, or just for having it with a little bit of melted butter or some of this infusion here, and just having it as a mash. Let me wash my hands real quick. Okay, now I'm gonna add this to our Vitamix. All right, so it goes right in. Now what's great about this recipe, a lot of times when we blend soups, they're blended, you transfer it from cooking on the stovetop, and I have plenty of soups that work that kind of technique. What's great about this one is it's cooled off, so this is pretty safe. It's almost like blending up a smoothie. I'm not going to put all of it in, it's pretty full, and we'll probably add a little more later as we go. The other ingredient I have here is some roasted garlic. That'll taste good. So this is pretty thick, we need some liquid. Let's add the stock. This stock came right out of the fridge. Like I said, we make these ahead of time all the time. And I don't really need to heat it up, I just need to pour it in. And this makes it really safe for me to make the soup, blend it really nicely. So let's start with this right now, and then we'll add the other liquids. Pull it forward. Okay, I'm using a variable speed Vitamix. This is really important when you're making soup. Make sure you start at 1. Don't start at the top number here, number 10. That would be a bad idea. Sometimes there's an air gap and it will it might poof up here at the top here, especially if it's hot. You want to put a cloth right on top, okay? And I just get in the habit of doing this just for safety and also so I don't mess up. Here we go. Getting it going. It's very thick. It's like a puree right now. So this is not, in my mind, it's not soup. It's more like baby food. Really good baby food though. And it doesn't have all the spices, so really it could be. So now we're going to add our coconut milk. Might as well just add the other liquid in here because what I'm trying to look for is the right consistency. And you know I showed you this mineral broth, but I might not need it. We'll see what happens. One thing I'd like to share with you is this is not even a recipe. I mean, I can write it up for you. That's no problem. If you're interested, let me know, and I'm happy to write it up. But a lot of times we just cook, you know? You get into the kitchen, you have the ingredients in front of you, and you just sort of know what to do with them. And that's sort of how a lot of our soups get put together, a lot of our other main courses. So we're going to add about half a cup. I think about half a cup ought to do it. Whatever's left over you can use for a smoothie later on. So I'm going to set that up. And I can see because the liquid is sort of sitting on top, there's an air gap, so I'm just going to give it a little stir before I start to blend. We'll see if that works. Okay, there's this really nice tool that Vitamix makes. It's called a tamper, and of course I don't have it here with me, but that's okay. Make sure it's completely stopped before you do what I'm doing. So if you get in there, I'm going to add a little stock now. Really smooth, everyone. Thanks for sticking with me. All right, I think we got one more whirl and then we'll add it to the pot. Beautiful. Okay, so now let's add it to the pot. And once I add it here, I'm going to add more stock if I need it. I'll add a little bit of the coconut milk. We'll just see how it goes, because I still think it's a little thick. But I'm going to add it right into this pot. So you can see it's kind of thick. And if you wanted it smoother, you could blend it a little more. All right. Get all that goodness out of there. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn up the heat We want a little warmth here when we add in the infusion. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to give it a little stir. So to make soup, when you see this, if you're looking down here in the pot, you see how when I pour back in and it kind of sits on top? That to me is still like baby food or a puree. So we want to add a little extra stock. And I want this to be a nice savory tasting soup. I like the sweetness of the coconut milk, but I don't want it to overpower. It's not the direction I want the soup to be in. But again, if you really love the flavor and the sweetness of coconut milk, you can add that instead of what I'm doing here. I'm adding the bone broth. So now, watch when I pour in. See how it goes? It's almost disappearing into itself. It's still got some weight. If you want it thinner still, you can add a little more stock. All right, this is the fun part. Now we have our infusion. And I'm going to get another spoon here. I'm not going to add all this oil. So what do you do with the leftover? Put it in a little ramekin or a, you can put it in a jar with a cap, and then you can save this and you can use it to flavor any roasted vegetable, whatever you'd like. So I'm going to add about probably 2 tablespoons of this to the soup. And then we'll taste and kind of adjust. Okay, I think 2 tablespoons ought to do it for this amount. And then you just warm it up. I think it's going to be really delicious. So a couple of things that you'll need to do when you're balancing your soup. You might need a little more salt. You might sometimes we need a little acid in the soup, so with just a touch of lemon or maybe a little apple cider vinegar. If you're thinking, gosh, I like it, but it's just not coming through enough for me. So those are the that's the part where culinary becomes an art, is really tasting your food. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to taste this and just see where it's at. It's not quite hot enough. I just want to see if we're in the direction with the spices that we want to go. That's very, very nice. I would definitely add more salt to that. And because I like spice, I think I'm going to actually add a little more of that infusion. So this is our add that in. And again, like I say, this is the time when you don't walk away from your stove. This is the part where you're really tasting, balancing, and getting it right. And before you know it, you have a nice light supper. It's great for lunch or, alongside a more hearty meal. So we'll come back again. I'll show you more soups. I'll show you more dinners and salads. Just come visit us again on our YouTube page or see us live on Facebook. We'll see you later. Bye.